Alors, bienvenue. Welcome to the all-party, very representative all-party press conference to call for the urgent release of political prisoner Jimmy Lai, a person who has been described as one of the most high-profile political prisoners in the world today. But I can tell you, as somebody who's represented political prisoners for close to 50 years, Jimmy Lai's case is a case study. His persecution and prosecution, a case study in the criminalization of innocence, in the criminalization of fundamental rights, in ongoing torture in detention, and in particular, and of particular relevance for us here, an assault on Canadian and international values of democracy, freedom, human rights, and the rule of law, all of which are represented and underpinned in Jimmy Lai's case and cause. And so I conclude by saying that Jimmy Lai, his criminalization of his innocence, is the imprisonment of human rights. Jimmy Lai's case and cause has to be seen as representing each and every one of us. Jimmy Lai represents us all. And that's why we are united here in calling for his urgent release, in calling for the conferring of Canadian citizenship on him, and on the eve of the G7 summit to mobilize the international community in the shared defense of his rights, freedom, rule of law, which is the rights and freedoms of all of us. Thank you.
First of all, thank you all for coming. It's a true honour to be among so many members of Parliament, senators, the defenders of democracy and freedom, like my father. My father has been in jail for the last 4.5 years. He's been in solitary confinement. And one of the worries we had going in the trial was that in their attempts to break him, we were worried that they had managed to do that. You know, like what does, I can't imagine what someone has to go through to spend more than 1,600 days by himself in a cell with light blocked off. And on the stand, he has shown that they haven't broken him, that the freedoms that he stood for aren't freedoms that they could buy or make him bow down and give up on. And so it's just is this tremendous story of this man who has stood for everything that we believe and everything that we know is right, and he is still fighting. And I think he would be so tremendously grateful and happy to know that there is all these wonderful people that are still fighting for him, fighting for his release, and fighting for this promise of freedom, that you don't have to die to stand up for what is right. So thank you all.
Thank you, everyone. I'm Caoilfhionn Gallagher KC, and I lead the international legal team. I've got the privilege of working with the brilliant Professor Cotler on this deeply shocking case. Today marks 1,622 days of unlawful imprisonment for Jimmy Lai. He's been in solitary confinement throughout that time. He's 77, turning 78 this year, and he's diabetic. And make no mistake, this press conference today is of vital importance, not just to secure Jimmy Lai's liberty, but also to save his life. Because what he faces is a life sentence, or in reality, a death sentence, simply for speaking truth to power. And what we've seen play out since December 2023 in the courtroom in Hong Kong is a case which essentially involves an allegation of conspiracy to commit journalism and conspiracy to raise human rights and pro-democracy values and to press for values which Canada holds so dear. We are hugely grateful for the bipartisan, broad support that we have here in Canada. We similarly have very good support in a range of places around the world, including in the US, the UK, the European Union. On the eve of the G7, we think it is critical that we now come together to ensure that all of those who've called for Jimmy Lai's immediate and unconditional release, including those many countries, including the UN Working Group on Arbitrary Detention and 5 United Nations experts. It's vital that we convert those words calling for his immediate and unconditional release to reality before it is too late and before we see this brave, brilliant man die behind bars for running a newspaper with pro-democracy values. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're hearing so much about Jimmy Lai and just how important, as a pro-democracy advocate and journalist who stands for the very values that we all cherish as Canadians, media freedom and the rule of law. Despite his age and health issue, Mr. Lai remains imprisoned in torturous conditions under Hong Kong's repressive national security law, the provisions of which are inconsistent with international human rights law. March 2024, the Subcommittee on International Human Rights issued a statement calling for the release of Jimmy Lai and expressed their solidarity with everyone advocating for freedom and justice in Hong Kong, echoing that Jimmy Lai stood up for the truth and for his fellow Hong Kongers, and now we must stand up for him. I will be doing a statement calling on the Government of Canada to give Jimmy Lai honorary citizenship today. And shortly, I hope to be able to introduce a unanimous consent motion that I have put together with all of my colleagues here that we will be able to pass shortly in the House of Commons. Thank you all very much.
Good afternoon. I'd just like to build on the excellent comments that have been shared so far and provide a local community connection. Jimmy Lai has strong family and business ties to Canada. His mother is Canadian, and his twin sister and his extended family are Canadian, and they reside in Ontario. Mr. Lai's business investments in Canada and Ontario are significant. Since he first began investing in Niagara-on-the-Lake in the mid-1990s, Mr. Lai now owns 12 hotels, 20 restaurants, 4 spas, and various real estate assets across southern Ontario, as well as over 100 million development projects in Canada. In fact, Lai properties are a significant driver of local tourism in Niagara-on-the-Lake. As the owner of Vintage Hotels and Niagara's finest hotels, Lai properties include some of the most significant landmark destinations in our beautiful and historic town. These include the Pillar and Post Inn and Spa, the Prince of Wales Hotel, Queen's Landing Inn, the Moffat Inn, and the Shaw Club. In total, Mr. Lai owns 8 properties within Niagara-on-the-Lake, 2 in Jordan, 1 in Caledon, and 1 in Stratford. There's a reason why many refer to Niagara-on-the-Lake as the prettiest town in Canada, and it is because of the type of investments and commitment to our tourism community that Mr. Lai and his family have made, which have illuminated that fact. The prosecution in the People's Republic of China accusing Mr. Lai of practicing journalism, speaking to politicians about politics, and raising real and genuine concerns about accountability, everyday activities that we deem as ordinary, legal, and expected in a democracy such as Canada. If convicted in the coming months, Mr. Lai faces life behind bars. Time is running out. Today, we are urging Canada's delegation at the G7 to champion Mr. Lai's freedom. We are also calling on the Government of Canada to grant Mr. Lai Canadian honorary citizenship to recognize not only his strong connection and commitment to this country, but also his extraordinary bravery, pursuit of justice, and the defense of democracy. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. As a former senior judge of the Quebec Court of Appeal, I feel that's important to speak today about the rule of law. Lord Sumption, a very distinguished British judge, wrote in June 2024, I quote, "Hong Kong, once a vibrant and politically diverse community, is slowly becoming a totalitarian state. The rule of law is profoundly compromised in any area about which the government feels strongly." End of quote. Unfortunately, he was proven right. The trial of Jimmy Lai that started in December 2023 is still going on with arguments to be made in August. That trial shows that the executive in Hong Kong, following the orders of the Beijing government, is putting in place a political systems to repress freedom and to prevent and to make examples of dissenters to make sure that they end up and die in jails. Canada has to stand for the rule of law as we've done in the past. And today, I think I'm calling on our government and all of us Canadians that believe in the rule of law to stand up for Hong Kong and for the rule of law and the release, immediate release of a man who is over 76, is sick and suffering of diabetes, is a Roman Catholic practitioner, and he's been kept in insulations on his own cell for years and years. This is cruel. This is against all international rules. Au nom des, comme ancien juge de la Cour d'appel du Québec, je dois dire à mes collègues francophones au Canada que la règle de droit est importante et que le temps est venu pour le gouvernement du Canada de dénoncer un procès qui est purement politique et qui défie toutes les règles de droit, aussi bien de Hong Kong garanties dans sa constitution que par le droit international. Et il est temps qu'on offre à Jimmy Lai qu'il soit libéré et rapatrié au Canada, aux États-Unis, au Royaume-Uni, mais dans un pays où la règle de droit a encore de l'importance. Merci de votre attention.
Bien, bonjour tout le monde. J'aime quand la politique se fait de cette façon-là, quand tout le monde est uni, de façon transpartisane, des gens de tous les partis, des deux chambres ici sur la colline parlementaire. La démocratie et la liberté de presse, c'est deux valeurs que les Canadiens, les Québécois partagent, chérissent, veulent protéger, mais elle est attaquée de toutes parts, un peu partout sur la planète. Le cas de Jimmy Lai est un exemple, je pense, symbolique de cette attaque qui est faite envers la démocratie et envers la liberté de presse, et on se doit de réagir. Il y a deux appels qui sont faits aujourd'hui. En fait, utiliser le sommet du G7 pour faire valoir l'appel à la libération de Jimmy Lai. Et il y aura des conversations de couloir qui seront extrêmement importantes. Et on demande au gouvernement du Canada et ses représentants qui seront au G7 d'avoir ces conversations-là pour faire avancer la cause de la libération de Jimmy Lai. Et le deuxième appel qu'on fait, c'est d'octroyer la citoyenneté honorifique canadienne à Jimmy Lai. Et ça, c'est un appel extrêmement important. Ça s'est déjà vu dans le passé. Donc, oui, on va essayer de faire passer une motion unanime pour demander, finalement, à la ministre, la nouvelle ministre de l'Immigration, d'octroyer, c'est son pouvoir, cette citoyenneté honorifique-là. Et aujourd'hui, je pense que tout le monde est uni, tout le monde est ensemble, on parle d'une seule voix. Et ce qu'on espère sincèrement, c'est que ces deux appels-là seront bien entendus. Merci.
Thank you, everybody, for being here. I also am grateful to be joined by my Conservative colleagues, MPs Baldinelli, Dean Allison, and James Bazan. We are now over at a halfway point of a half-century deal, once negotiated between Margaret Thatcher and Deng Xiaoping. In that deal was a concept of the basic law for the people of Hong Kong, a deal that would have ensured and enshrined their rights for 50 years. That betrayal by Beijing through its national security law is tearing apart norms, not just in relations with Beijing, but norms around the world, norms that are underpinned by the rule of law and basic human rights. And so the cause that we are here to speak to, which is Mr. Lai's advocacy through his press, his support for Hong Kongers and their democracy, embodies the very values that Canadians also hold dear: freedom of the press, the rule of law, and moral courage. At 77 years old, diabetic, and imprisoned in torturous conditions, Lai faces life in prison under Beijing's repressive national security law. Canada's Parliament has spoken with one voice, both in the House and the Senate unanimously called for Jimmy Lai's release in December 2023. In February 24, the Subcommittee on International Human Rights examined Lai's case with Sebastien, reaffirming Canada's solidarity with all who stand for freedom in Hong Kong. Jimmy Lai is no stranger to Canada, as MP Baldinelli has said. He has Canadian family, built businesses here, supported our tourism economy, and employs over 1,500 Canadians. Parliament once stood up for Vladimir Kara-Murza with honorary citizenship. Jimmy Lai deserves exactly the same. Canada must honor a man who stood for truth and liberty, and they must do so by standing with him now in the unanimous consent motion that will be soon before Parliament. Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Jenny Kwan. I'm the NDP Member of Parliament, and I'm joined today with my colleague Heather McPherson from Edmonton, Strathcona. I'm here to say the same things that people have been thinking and fighting for a very long time. And the truth of the matter is, I was born in Hong Kong, and so on this issue is particularly close to my heart. The reality is the Chinese government brought forward a national security law that stripped Hong Konger their basic rights, that those who dare to speak up and to fight against this were persecuted. Jimmy Lai is one of those individuals. He dared to speak truth to power. He dared to continue to run Apple Daily that actually puts forward news and important news for the public to see. And by doing that, he has been persecuted. He's been imprisoned. He's now 77 years old in weak health, and still the Chinese government continued to persist. We're here to say very clearly, free Jimmy Lai. He stands for democracy. He stands for basic human rights. He stands with the international community who's condemned the Chinese government on their national security law. And so this basically has to be done. If the Chinese government values their reputation in any way, shape, or form, and if they hope to have a future for Hong Kongers in the eyes of the international community. Last but not least, I'll say this. Yesterday, I had about a minute and a half to ask questions of the Minister of Immigration. And one of those questions was, will she grant Jimmy Lai Canadian citizenship, honorary Canadian citizenship? I was sad to hear the response. It was a strange response where she said it was a private matter. Actually, it isn't. It is a ministerial decision that she can make right now and to grant Jimmy Lai honorary citizenship. The NDP supports that. I believe all parties supports that. It should not even require a unanimous consent motion for that to happen. The government should just do it. So let's get it done and send a clear message to free Jimmy Lai and to say he represents Canadian values, represents international values on freedom and justice. Thank you.
L'ex-magnat de la presse Jimmy Lai est devenu le symbole de la liberté de presse bafouée à Hong Kong. Cela me touche particulièrement car j'ai été longtemps journaliste. Hong Kong n'a plus de presse libre. Il y a 4 ans, Jimmy Lai a été forcé de fermer son quotidien populaire et emblématique, le Apple Daily, critique de la Chine et bien sûr pro-démocratie. Jimmy Lai a été jeté en prison. Depuis ce temps, la presse est au banc des accusés dans ce procès politique qui s'éternise. Et la santé de Jimmy Lai, comme on vous l'a dit, décline. Il est âgé, atteint de diabète, en isolement. Donc, le Canada, qui se décrit comme un champion de la liberté de presse, doit agir, que ce soit dans des négociations diplomatiques, mais aussi en donnant le plus rapidement possible la citoyenneté canadienne honoraire à Jimmy Lai. C'est un premier pas. Il faut commencer quelque part. Nous, les parlementaires, nous avons un rôle à jouer. Le Canada aussi. Merci.
Merci, chers députés, sénateurs, sénatrices, pour vos interventions émouvantes. We'll now take questions from the press en français et en anglais. Oui, et le sénateur Miville-Dechêne vous partagez que M. Sebastien Lai est parfaitement bilingue et peut prendre des questions en français aussi. We say represents Canadian values, truly, in the bilingualism.
I'd like to ask a question in English, which is, what practical difference do you think honorary citizenship, honorary Canadian citizenship would make, given that the Chinese government hasn't had many qualms about locking up Canadians in the past?
Sure, thank you. Would anybody like to take that question, perhaps MP Srgo?
Well, we've seen that with the Russian diplomat previously, was granted honorary citizenship, and that helped immensely with his freedom. We believe very much, along with the legal team, that if Canada shows its support for Jimmy Lai, that the honorary citizenship will help to free him, especially in advance of the G7.
If he were granted Canadian citizenship, in Sebastian's view, do you think he would come and live in Canada?
If he was granted honorary citizenship?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, look, his twin sister's here. He's got many nieces and nephew, grandnieces and nephew here. He will. I mean, I think if it wasn't for his fight in Hong Kong, his fight for democracy in Hong Kong that he did in the last 30 years, he'd be enjoying life here. He'd be enjoying life in the United Kingdom, where he's a full British citizen, and is actually the only citizenship that he holds. But yeah, I definitely think that you would see him in Canada. You'd definitely see him in Niagara Lake, you know. You'd be here as well if you have him. Yeah, look, I think it has gotten to a point where at 72, my father had a decision to make, right? Whether he stayed in Hong Kong after the passing of the national security law and stayed to defend his journalist, act as a lightning rod if he had to, or leave at an age where most people would have retired. And you know, I'm very proud of him that he stayed. And I think him staying is illustrative of the courage that he has shown in the face of oppression and the courage that is necessary to have a country such as Canada where these freedoms are celebrated. So the long and short of it is that yes, like if he is released, I'm sure he would come to Canada. I'm sure he'd go around the world wherever they'll have him, and you know, we'll work hard for that day to come.
I just wanted to add one thing, given the reference in the question to China having no qualms in imprisoning foreign citizens, and I wanted to speak to actually Canada's leadership in relation to securing the release of political prisoners around the world, and also the important work that can be done when people work multilaterally. I mean, we've seen in the last number of years a number of very important releases from China. Of course, the two Michaels, the Australian journalist Cheng Lai, whose release was secured, the American citizen, Pastor David Lynn, the pro-democracy advocate, and you can hear my accent, also the Irish businessman, Richard O'Halloran. Now, in all of those cases, what you had was political will and creativity. And Canada played a critical part, working with partners, particularly the USA and Germany, last August in securing that remarkable deal which brought home so many people from Russia, including, of course, Vladimir Kara-Murza, honorary Canadian citizen, and Paul Whelan, who is Canadian along with his other citizenships. But that was a really good indication of how, with political will and creativity working together, even at a time when war is waging, a deal could be done with Russia, which brought people home to their families. And here what we're asking is that Canada, with G7 partners this week, thinks creatively and uses political will to push this over the line and bring Jimmy Lai home to his son, Sebastien, to his granddaughter and to his family before it's too late.
Are there any other questions from the press? Plus de questions? Well, all right. Well, thank you again, everyone, for being here, for those members of the press gallery tuning in online, and for all of our friends across party lines from both chambers who are here in support of Jimmy Lai today. Thank you.
Thank you. This concludes the press conference. Merci. C'est ce qui conclut cette conférence de presse.
Yeah.